Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are, in nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. And welcome to Church History Part 4, which is going to be called Luther's Germany. So I realized the last video that I did on beating the Protestant Reformation, three notes. One is that we have an unboxing. I just didn't want to dox myself, so I had to rip off the label, so it's been somewhat ripped off. But we have an old RSV Oxford Study Bible, and it's revised English. And the great thing is, I didn't know this when I ordered it, but it has tabs for each book. So now when you say Jude chapter 2, well, I'll be able to pull right up to Jude. And then when you say Isaiah, so you will see, here we go. And it's not going to be difficult at all. This part probably needs some tape, because they probably all need some tape. But that's really cool. So, and also it's like an older version, so it'll be out of copyright, or hopefully people won't mind as much. That is copyright. Now, the other point that I kind of forgot was, look, we're always learning over here. I'm not much of a European history buff, and yet, well, I'm winding up having to learn it and teach it with you. So as we know, Jerusalem is over here, and we know Alexandria, an ancient city of learning, is over here. Constantinople, which is the imperial capital after the fall of Rome in 410, is over here. And this was Antioch. And finally, this is Rome. And so, I don't know if we can draw a straight line, but okay, so let us mark this as the resurrection of our Lord. So we have 300, which would be Nicaea. We have 410, which is supposedly the fall of Rome. I'm told it's really not the Dark Ages. We have 632, the rise of Islam. We have 1053, which is the Great Schism between East and West. 1054, I think. Then we have 1190, which is Saladin retakes Jerusalem. And then, so we kind of skipped St. Augustine. So St. Augustine would be writing right around the 400s, which is right above the time of Islam. And then we also would have skipped St. Thomas Aquinas, who I think is around the 1200s. Now, you're supposed to call him St. Thomas and not Aquinas, but for the purpose. And then we kind of just skipped right away to 1500, which is, 1517, if you recall, which would be the Protestant Reformation. So I also realized that we kind of skipped around. We didn't go over Germany too well. Now, as you would know, a few things. First, I said Venice was somewhere over here. Venice is here. And we will see they later form the Venetian city-states. Milan is like here, and Florence is here. So Florence was also trading, but Venice was all the way on this side. And then also Christopher Columbus was Genoa, which is here. But, so I have to make a correction, because I said Venice was on this side of Italy. Venice is on this side, and they were amazing traders. Now, what we're going to be discussing today mostly would be called Germany. But what I traced out was the Holy Roman Empire. And so as you would know by now, this is France, and this is Spain. Portugal, of course, is next to Spain. This is England, which is an island just off the coast. Well, Great Britain, which is off the coast. I have to issue another correction. So I said Netherlands and Belgium were parted this way. Actually, they're more parted this way. Netherlands would be over here. Now this is Denmark, which is north. And again, it's not part of the whole Holy Roman Empire, what you're talking about. But Netherlands, whose people are called Dutch. And then Belgium would be this part, which kind of remained Catholic. Now, there's another country called Luxembourg, which is right over here. And that kind of also goes into this because we'll see that. And then Switzerland also kind of filters into, there's two characters, Zwingle, well, it was last time, but we'll go into it this time. So this is Switzerland, whose people are called Swiss. It's always been a neutral country. So what they profess is we have a lot of the reformers in the Netherlands and Switzerland. So that's why it's good to get acquainted with European kind of history. This, of course, is Italy. Anyone would know that. And I forgot to draw Sicily over here, but we will see I drew it correctly over here. This is Greece. And this is what we would call Turkey today. So, and this is Russia. And then down here, it was where Islam came from, which is Saudi Arabia, or it was just Arabia back then. And this is Egypt. Now, the other map doesn't show Africa as much. It'll show maybe the tip of, Algeria over here, or Tunisia. But if you wanted to know, this is Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, and Egypt. The Sudan would be below here. Morocco, of course, is here. So Africa is kind of excluded from that history. But like I said, we're going to go mostly into Germany. And so Germany, also in the 1800s, when the guy is writing the book which you're reading aloud, John Lord's history, A Modern History from Luther to the Fall of Napoleon. What we're doing is Germany was, he says, then as in now, of course now Germany is a united country, but back then it was several hundred princely kingdoms. And it kind of includes Switzerland, and it includes most of northern Italy, and it definitely includes what we call today Czechoslovakia, and like Prague and all that. So it's like a gigantic empire, and in fact it even goes up to much of Italy and up until the Papal States. So it is, and I think it includes, so it has incredible influence. It has one emperor. So it's like hundreds of princely kingdoms. And what's interesting is there's one part called Saxony, which is kind of important. I think I hope I don't have to pull it up too much. But, so we're back to the Reformation, and this is more in depth about Luther's time. So as we kind of said, well, there's no dots on this one, but this is the zoomed in map. And so just to go over it again, this would be our Germany as we understand it today. This, and then this is actually called the Kingdom of Bohemia. And then this is called the Papal States because it includes Rome. But it's, here it is called the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. So technically this is the island of Sicily, and this is Corsica and Sardinia. But this and this is the same kingdom. So, like I said, this is all Holy Roman Empire. So to go off my cheat sheet a little bit, so that will be Rome, where the papacy is. So it's called the Holy Roman Empire because the Pope still exercises a lot of influence. This would be Denmark today, but of course it's called the Kingdom of Denmark because it's technically outside. It's always been kind of independent. But the Kingdom of Denmark. So I think this was called Burgundy. I'm really not sure. I have to look this up again. But if you know, this is France. This is Spain. I think they were split into like Catalonia and England, of course. But I think this is Burgundy. Let me kind of be sure about it. This would be Northern Italy, so Milan. So I read, so I think this is, it was very interesting. So this is like Bulgaria, Kingdom of. And this is Serbia, Kingdom of. So it was very interesting how, and then this Poland actually then was a kingdom. So I have to kind of, they had their own thing kind of going on. So this is just to orient you kind of to modern day things. These are two islands, Corsica. They're kind of important. And Sardinia. I think I got them backwards, maybe. Corsica and Sardinia. And again, but don't swear by this, but I'm pretty sure that's the Kingdom of Burgundy. And so this is just to orient you into our modern map of Europe. I don't think we're going to be using that one, but it's just fun. I guess it's just fun watching me color. It just makes it more dynamic and engaging. But this one I can cheat a little bit because I kind of drew the dots beforehand. And I don't have to write Germany, England, and France, Spain, and Italy anymore. Oh, and something very interesting. So this is Venice. It's a whole kingdom, and I think it actually also incorporates this side, which would be somewhat on this side. So it was interesting to find out, like, I don't know which side Venice was again. It's always interesting to continue learning. That is a very fun part of life. So I'm going to go off this sheet over here, but to go over the history, Luther begins at a monastery. He's consecrated as a priest. He's invited to Wittenberg by Saxony, by the Elector of Saxony or the Prince of Saxony. And I found out he's like the most powerful. He's also like central Germany and one of the most powerful princes of the Holy Roman Empire. Probably the most powerful and center of learning, certainly. Then he goes back to Wittenberg and so Erasmus is also pursuing similar reforms. He's born in Rotterdam, which is in the Netherlands. And then he is, though, living in Basel, which is in Switzerland. And as we'll see, Switzerland is kind of, again, important to the revolutions that we're talking about. Then we have Melanchthon, who is also at the university in Wittenberg, which is in Saxony. And then they meet at Augsburg. They are summoned by the Cardinal Legate, which we'll see is a little bit more towards the south. So the center of power in the empire. Whenever he's in trouble, he's called like closer towards Rome. And then Leipzig, he's also summoned where there's a famous disputation. And that's where he has a formal break with the Roman Catholic Church. So let's go over these things right now. So let's see if we can not overwhelm our viewers. And also go into a very interesting history. And like I said, I have a cheat sheet kind of right now. So where are we starting with? Luther enters a monastery at Erfurt. And so the interesting thing is, though, this is where he'll always kind of have a connection because it is... That's not Erfurt. Okay, forget about that one. We're allowed to make mistakes, right? So Erfurt is up here where Germany kind of in the middle, and there's like a Thuringian forest. So this whole area, though, will kind of be where he stages his revolution most of his life. And so, like I was saying, this is what we might call Czechoslovakia today, and this is kind of why I started a new chart, but it's going to be called Bohemia for now. And I kind of labeled this, so this is Prague, which is one of our major cities. And Saxony, and this would be, again, to identify a city today in Germany, if you know, it's called Dresden. And so these are two cities that, of course, still exist. Bohemia, obviously, Czechoslovakia today. And so Saxony is... So Leipzig, where the disputation happens, is more like over here. So you could consider basically Saxony kind of incorporates this kind of area. Now, this is very rough. Please don't take this like to be Encyclopedia Britannica or something. But the Elector of Saxony, Frederick, he has a lot of provincial control. And this is the westernmost part, right before Bohemia. Well, Bohemia is the westernmost part. But... so he also controls Leipzig. He also controls Wittenberg, which is just north up. So the Elector of Saxony, Frederick, he's the sponsor of Luther for most of his life. And so therefore, most of his patronage is going on over here, which is by the university And then the most, even today, the most populous city is Dresden with 1 million people. But Wittenberg is up here. And so Luther is spending originally though time as a monk over here. This is where he encounters St. Augustine. Then he goes down to a pilgrimage to Rome, which again, Rome obviously is over here. So he does a pilgrimage. And he comes back and he never likes the ostentatious display of wealth that the church is engaged in. And he becomes a doctor of divinity the same year in 1512, as we said. And in 1517, he nails the 95 Theses on the door right up here. To orient yourself, I don't know if you know modern Germany, but I had a very interesting trip around modern Germany. And I guess we'll do that in red. But this is the city of Hamburg, which is in the north. And again, this is where the Kingdom of Denmark is. They've always been a separate country. So Hamburg is right close to there. And then we have two cities. One is called Cologne and the other is called Frankfurt. So these are in Western Germany. And then Munich is kind of down here. Okay, according to me, that would be Munich. And then later on, it comes kind of important also to Protestant creeds. If you watch Justin Sinner's channel, which is Pastor Justin, who's a Lutheran pastor, the Augsburg Confession. So Augsburg is down here, and Munich is down here in real life. Well, I mean, this is real life, but this is history, and this is where we are today. And so, and right above that would be Ingolstadt, which we're going to get into in just a minute. So Luther is a monk over here, and at a very young age, he's invited to become he becomes a priest, and he becomes the professor of theology and a doctor of divinity at a prestigious new university at Wittenberg by the Elector of Saxony. So again, you have the most powerful and cultural state of the German Empire, aka the Holy Roman Empire, or German Imperial Confederation. So, and it kind of pretty much had the blessing of the Catholic Church involved. These would be the papal states. The Pope had control over these fine territories, as his personal fiefdom. So Vatican City was a compromise made in 1929. So before that, this was always his exclusive domain. Not bad for one guy. So, now what kind of comes up later is there's the Edict of Worms, which condemns Protestants, and also the Edict of Augsburg, which also condemns Protestants. Those are both repealed by the end of the chapter. And Augsburg is, so these being in the south, they're the German states of Bavaria today. I think, okay, so this is Prussia. And again, I'm not sure, so don't hold me to it. Well, it was Prussia. So all this was like kind of northern Germanic. And so this was like Germany might have been quite a bit bigger, because these two are not part of modern Germany today. Neither is most of this. I mean, certainly not this. It was just Switzerland. So, what was I doing? So this is Bavaria. That would be Prussia. Okay, so let's continue. And so then I said we meet Erasmus. Now, Erasmus was born in Rotterdam, which is in the Netherlands. And so that would be over here. And Rotterdam is not too far from Amsterdam, which is the capital of the Netherlands. But he was preaching, it says over here, in Basel, which is in Switzerland. So now I'm saying, I think I saw something. Basel is like over here and Zurich is over here. So let's just label this. I think it's called the Swiss Confederation. But let's just call it Switzerland. And so, but he was from here. Basel, let's just label that. Here we call it Zurich, which is obviously the capital of Switzerland today. And so finally, when Luther was first in trouble, he was called to Augsburg, So he's at Wittenberg and he's called to Augsburg, which again, it's much closer to Rome. So you see the seat of power. So he goes to Augsburg and he leaves, but he comes back without defying the authority of the Pope, because he's not told that he's dismissed. But he's like, yeah, I'm going back to my university. I'm not going to face like your censure or like your death penalty or some heretics were kidnapped, some heretics were executed. So he didn't want to face being captured. So page 2 of my notes, that's page 1 so far. I hope you were able to follow that, where Luther's life is taking him. Like I said, he started off in Erfurt, then he goes to Wittenberg, and then he's summoned to Augsburg. He runs back to Wittenberg. Oops, sorry, you couldn't see any of that. Okay, so he starts off in Erfurt, he goes to Wittenberg, he's summoned to Augsburg, he runs back to Wittenberg. In 1520, he burns the papal decree, meaning he's condemned, and he burns the papal decree at Wittenberg. Again, Wittenberg is in the northern part of Saxony. The Diet of Worms is called in 1521. The Emperor Charles V calls it, and again, Worms is by what we would call Frankfurt today. So Luther refuses to recant. He faces voluntary imprisonment at Wartburg, which is in the Thuringian Forest, translating the New Testament to German. Now I found, so Wartburg is very close to Erfurt. So where he was imprisoned, it was just a nice, beautiful part of the forest. And he didn't miss much. Like, it was basically back to his usual life, so it was very calm and serene. Then he goes back to Wittenberg to fight Karlstadt, because Karlstadt had more radical reforms in mind. So he prevents someone from hijacking the revolution. And there's a guy named Thomas Müntzer. He, in Bohemia, which is over here, there basically another more radical Protestant revolution breaks out in Bohemia. And Luther has a choice. Does he side with this theological ally, or does he side with his political patrons, which are the princes of Germany? And not surprisingly, he sides with his political patrons, which are the princes of Germany. And so they crush the revolution from this radical named Thomas Müntzer. But meanwhile, Zwingli was more successful for a time being. He was in Switzerland. He was against the popes. He was against indulgences. He inspired Calvin, but he was still too radical for Luther because they disputed over transubstantiation. Catholics say that it is literally Christ, which is in the body and blood, the elements of bread and wine of the Holy Eucharist. Others say that it is merely symbolic. So, again, we're in Switzerland over here. Kind of becomes a country later on. Always neutral, even in World War II. Made of cantons, even to this day, like 10 different towns. That's very small. So what they do in Switzerland is he proposes a League of Reformers, but he's killed. And Switzerland returns to Catholicism. So one would imagine Luther sees this, right? Like in 1527, you got two reformers, right? Thomas Müntzer, radical, killed. Zwingli, radical reformer, killed. So I think Luther would probably get it in his head that you're achieving some measure of success. The princes of Germany are with you. The Elector of Saxony certainly is with you. So, Northern Germany certainly wants independence. And, I mean, it's something to keep in mind. Let me put it this way. I read a comment on the New York Times website. The same way that... So this is the Roman Empire at its peak, right? You had Italy. You had Greece. You had Anatolia. Much of that. And Egypt. Yeah, and you definitely had Carthage. So let's just give them all of North Africa. So you have the Roman Empire at its peak, covering the better part, the entire Mediterranean. So, but the thing was, though, it was always fighting the Gauls. right? So it was always fighting. There were the people in northern Germany, the Gauls, and also the Celts over here in France, and also obviously the barbarians in England. So you always had these Germanic barbarian tribes which were resisting Roman rule. And so even out here in Hungary, you had the Magyars and all these various Hun groups. So you had all these tribes. So you could look at the entire history of the Roman Empire as Southern Europe telling Northern Europe what to do. And it was resisting that hegemony, like Rome kind of collapsed. I mean, I read something very beautiful. It was that Christianity civilized the Germanic races in time for the Industrial Revolution. Otherwise, they would not have been able to hold back the Roman Empire and its forces. Let me find that quote by the end of this. So, I'll put it in the description. So, you have Southern Europe trying to conquer or resist Northern Europe, and you have the Germanic tribes always pushing against Southern Europe. And yes, forward 1,000 or 2 years later, 1,000 years later, 1,500 years later, you have Northern Europe becoming Protestant, Southern Europe remaining Catholic. And you have something very similar kind of going on. You have Europe fighting over Protestant or Catholic. Southern Europe remains Catholic, including Ireland. Well, and Northern Europe, more or less, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland. Poland, of course, is still Catholic. But these Swedish countries, they become more or less Protestant. So you have this resistance. You always have this cultural, two different cultures going on. This empire was like too big and too unruly, probably. So Zwingli dies, and finally you have a diet at Augsburg. And this is all the Holy Roman Empire people getting together. And so, how did I illustrate the Holy Roman Empire? I think we lost it. But this is the Holy... Like I said, so Saxony's over here. This is part of the Holy Roman Empire too. Germany certainly is. Netherlands certainly is. I think Burgundy is. These are certainly under the influence. Those are the papal states. But like I said, they have the blessing of the Pope. So it really functions in line with the Pope. So this is the Holy Roman Empire. And so you have a diet at Augsburg, which I'm going to guesstimate is like over here. And at Augsburg, Luther makes this point. And the most famous Protestant creed today is called the Augsburg Confessions. And this is why, because this was Luther's last stand. And right around Augsburg, there's also Smalcald. And so they have a political league called the League of Smalcald that was formed in 1530. But at the same time, so 1530, you have the conference at Augsburg. And the Catholics actually win because, like I said, most of this time, they're so close to the Pope and they're so close to the empire, and including the emperor. It's still a very conservative kind of thing going on, that even if half the princes of Germany and Bohemia are with the Protestants, it is still very much Catholic dominated. And so while Luther is condemned at Augsburg, those confessions become part of the creed basically for Protestants. And the other benefit is that because of conflicts with the Ottoman Turks are coming out from over here, Muslims basically, they have to, the emperor wants to make peace with all of his German princes and all of his German nobles, so he recalls the condemnation at the Edict of Augsburg and the Edict of Worms. And so by the time Luther dies in 1545, let me make a note here, right? So we had 1517 is when he called it out. 1545 is when Martin Luther dies. Because we should note that within 30 years, basically, he accomplished so much. Even though I later read that the war in Germany, it's called the 30 Years' War, It killed 1 in 5 people, 20% of the population in Germany. So it was very bloody to lose all those princes and all those people. But he still accomplished, he survived, whereas many other reformers did not. And he had the political success because the League of Smalcald. Now, I took a note that Smalcald was right around. Oh, right, I did 2 little squares. Okay, right. So this was, again, in Saxony. So in Smalcald, they had this agreement between all the Protestant powers that they would stick up for each other. So politically, the revolution was achieved. And theologically, the Protestant Reformation was safe because they had the patronage of the northern German princes and the powers that be. So the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire promised that he would not interfere with Protestantism or the nobles who supported it. So the Lutheran, quote, heresy was not suppressed. So that is the summary. I hope this helps you understand quite a bit of Northern European and Southern European tensions. And also, we kind of went through 1500 years of history while skipping around quite a bit. And finally, we also understood that chapter a little bit more about Luther's life, because I didn't understand really where Germany is and how it be. So it just moves. He moves around from Saxony, and he's summoned from like Worms to Bavaria, southern Germany, whenever he's in trouble. And Leipzig was the other one. So he, remember that debate he has at Leipzig. It's pretty close to Wittenberg. And that's why it's, I think there's a dot there. But that's where the debate happens, and it's the cousin George of the Elder of Saxony. So he's having debates in Germany. This is kind of centered around this area, but he's from Germany, so he's very much comfortable debating all these people. And so Saxony, this red part, is pretty important because that's his patron throughout most of his life, and he's kind of on the edge of the empire anyway, but he's also the center of civilization. So he was very lucky actually to become patronized by a very powerful prince of the empire, probably the most powerful prince of the empire, short of the emperor. And so he was able to defy Rome and also lead a revolution for Northern Europe. So thank you very much for listening. God bless you and have a great day.